Okay.
Working relationship?
We're still waiting for Hannah Bonine from Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission, but we're gonna go ahead and get started. Everybody knows me, I'm Matt Fricker, and here we have Reagan Young and Lee J. Feldman from Southern Maine Planning and Development. And Lee J. and Reagan, do you know everybody in the audience, or shall we?
And I'd love to.
Okay, so Jim?
Jim Dahl, I'm on the front of the town.
Yes.
Alan Dahl, on this property. I was on the board for 30 years.
Bob Flint, I'm on the select board. Wes Cunderland, I'm retiring from CEO.
That's why the emails were bouncing back.
Mm-hmm.
It still works, the other fellow's been on for a week and a half, and probably next week, we'll try and have everything go to him.
Congratulations.
And he looks like a good guy to do it.
Good.
Yeah, that's great.
Kathy Pierce, concerned citizen and president of the library.
Joe Pierce, I'm her husband.
Your title, yeah.
I'm Norman Blake. I served on the last comprehensive plan 3 decades ago. I think, Alan, you were on it too, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're the only, well, in this room, we're the only surviving ones, and I was a little over a quarter century on the planning board most of the time.
They assigned you to that from high school, didn't they?
Actually, I was in junior high.
30 years ago, you were just a young pup.
I wish.
Don Sharp on the planning board.
Lori Downey, I'm on the Suffolk Charter Commission, now we do.
I'm Tracy Grisay on the planning board also.
So the way we have this set up is that there's kind of an advisory committee, which is a small group to do a lot of the heavy lifting and constant communication and contact and stuff, and that is Bob, Joe, Don, Tracy, and myself. And then we have a review council that when we have a work product that is really worth having you folks spend some time with and give some feedback on, or we need some important brainstorming sessions or something, that's the rest of the folks are on that kind of the town brain trust, if you will. And I was going to make a special mention, Norm, of you and Alan, because I was looking at the plan here, and I said, wow, you guys were on this back then. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. And you're Hannah.
Yes.
Hi, Hannah. Welcome. First time to Baldwin?
Yeah, got a little much.
Okay. All right.
I don't like it so far.
Yeah. Okay. And Bob, you were really the driving force behind the town getting started on, the comprehensive plan. So why don't you kick us off?
There were a couple of things that got us going on this, and one of this was about 1.5 years ago, we started as the planning board looking at our ordinances and discovered that a number of them were out of date. And subdivision ordinance was primary, and the more we got into it, the more we saw that there were other things changing at the state level with regards to housing, zoning, whatnot. 2 in particular was LD 1530, talks about tiny homes, and then there's another one that just passed this year was LD 2003, that's going to have a significant impact on density of housing, sites of housing units and whatnot. And rather than get great into modifying those, we realized that we really needed to update the comprehensive plan first and then make the ordinances support that. So I'm just looking at the last one, and as Norm mentioned, it was 1991, right up at the front it says it's a 10-year plan. And here we are 2 decades past that, 10-year period. One of it says they want to maintain the characteristics of the town, rural and village type, limit the cost of public services. I noticed in here, in the summary, it said one of the goals was reinforcing the existing 19th century village and rural lifestyle and environments. Well, I can tell you, I live on the corner of Route 5 and 113. The 21st century's here. There's enough traffic on that road there to show you. So, Matt, I appreciate your taking on the task of heading up this effort, and everybody else who's here. It's important for the town. We need to be looking forward for at least the next 10 years. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Well, okay, why don't we, get started and, keep it loose and flexible. Anybody gets hungry or thirsty, grab a drink. I think, Reagan, you suggested, there's no need to hold questions to the end or anything like that. We'll just, people have ideas or questions, just, let us know, and then, we'll get started with the, agenda.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. So I think our goal here today is to really orient everybody to the concept of what is the comp plan, for those of you who have not been involved before, what the purpose is, what we're doing here, and kind of like your expectations for the process going forward. So basically, the first thing to kick off is what actually is a comprehensive plan. I think Bob did a nice job of introducing that in the sense that the comp plan is supposed to be the foundation and the basis for all actions taken by the town, very broadly speaking. More specifically, the basis for your zoning ordinance. So you've done the right thing by wanting to go make changes to your zoning ordinance and thinking, wait a second, we need to revisit the comp plan first, because that is sort of the order of operations. The comp plan is a publicly informed document. It should reflect the needs and the hopes of your community, to the extent at which you can extract them from people and get that information out of them. And that's what gives the town sort of the know-all to be able to make those changes in the future. Saying, we have this plan, we did the research, we did the engagement, and it says this is what the people would like to do in the future. So to reiterate that again, zoning ordinances, the basis of your zoning ordinance and changes to your zoning ordinance should be coming directly from the recommendations that you all will make in your future plan. So each plan consists of generally 2 parts. The first part is what we call the inventory, and that is usually, it's the bulk of the plan. It's what you think of when you start flipping through your plan. It is very data-heavy, fast-paced information gathering. And it usually covers several different chapters, like housing and transportation and public facilities. And it's about collecting all of the possible current conditions and sort of trends of what has happened in your community so that you can come from an informed place when you go to make your recommendations. So that piece is the inventory. That's going to be our step 1. Step 2 is the goals, policies, and strategies, which is kind of a mouthful that you'll hear us say a million times. So what that really means is the future thinking section of the plan. It's part of the plan that says, okay, now we know what's going on, this is what we want to do going forward. So for the next sort of year, 10 to 12 months, we are going to be focusing on the inventory piece. A comp plan process in general is we hope, 18 to 24 months, 1.5 to 2 year process. And that's on a good clip. So that is that's a pretty adventurous and hopeful timeline, only compared to how other towns usually go. It can be very easy for this process to take a really long time, and that's obviously not our hope for you. There's momentum right now, there's issues right now, like you were saying, that's sort of driving this process. We want to get it done in a period of time where we don't lose that steam. So, like I said, first year-ish is about all that information gathering, and then the next 6-ish months should be focused on using that information to look forward, and start thinking about your future policies. So that's sort of the groundwork. There are some, things that drive this process, like the state law and state requirements, and I'm going to let Lee J kind of go into all of that and how that is kind of, the background to what we're doing here today.
Thank you. That was very good.
If you have questions, jump in. I know I just blabbed a bunch of info,
So some of you have heard me talk about this before as we were trying to get going on the comprehensive plan. Reagan certainly, excuse me, indicated talking about the state law. The way I look at it today, I'd say there is no state law. There is, but I can tell you that from where it was in 1991 when you folks did your last plan, and there was a little carrot out there and a stick for you to get some money to do some implementation and some money to do the comprehensive plan, none of that exists anymore. And with that, none of that existing anymore, during the years, the legislature basically gutted the law. And everything that said you shall do this and you shall do that became you may do this and you may do that. Difference is shall is required, may means you can if you want. And there are some implications to both. So we're going to talk about what we call consistent plans and not consistent plans. Not consistent plan doesn't mean it's a bad plan. But starting with a consistent plan means you have followed the letter of the law of the component parts that exist in the state's comprehensive planning document. And in doing that, you would submit it to the state for them to find the plan consistent. What does that mean to you today? Really nothing. When it first started, it was, every department at the state level is going to look at your comprehensive plan, and if you look for grants from the state, they're going to bump you up to the top of the list to get grant money because you have a consistent comprehensive plan. There's only one department or one state-level agency that does that at this point, and that's CDBG, if you're looking for a CDBG grant. Beyond that, the DOT doesn't really care. Inland Fisheries and Wildlife doesn't care when it comes to conservation issues. None of those agencies care. They care more about what you're requesting for a grant for and how is that going to work. They don't take the time to look at your comprehensive plan. If you chose to go in the direction of a plan that is not consistent with state law, what it means is there may be some items in the checklist, as I call it, which is about 50 pages thick, and you have to go through and check off every little piece in the box to say you're going to be consistent. If you choose not to look for a consistent comprehensive plan, it gives you the opportunity to be a little more creative. It's not just checking off the box and saying, yes, we met this. It also gives you the opportunity to, if you choose not to have other pieces of the law in your plan that you may feel hems you in for some reason or not. But there's more important pieces to why or why not be consistent, and Bob kind of touched on it a little bit, very briefly. I don't know how many of you have followed LD 2003 and what LD 2003 means, but I can tell you that right now, here in town, I'm going to give you just a very big brush on it, that you don't have sewer and water, correct? Right. All on septic and well. You don't have an urban compact area designated by the DOT, and you don't have a growth area in a consistent comprehensive plan. Because of that, there are certain parts of LD 2003 that you do not have to comply with. If you did have any one of those, including a growth area as part of a consistent comprehensive plan, you would have to accommodate affordable housing developments, and in doing so, they would get 2.5 times the density of whatever the base zone is that you're putting them into, or that they're looking to locate in, which is a lot more population density if someone chose to come here for that than what you've probably seen. The other part of that is that there's really no more single-family housing ordinances under this state law. If you were to meet that component of the law, you would have to accommodate up to 4 units on any single lot. It cannot say it can only be in those areas, and it cannot say it can only be a single-family home. You can't have your 2-acre to yourself. You can if you choose to, but you also have to accommodate up to 4 units. So there's pluses and minuses to this. There's no, I truthfully don't see a downside to not being consistent with the law, believe it or not. And I don't see a lot of upside these days to the plan being consistent. That being said, and I know Reagan lectured me on this today, no, we had the conversation in our office, the town of Brownfield just had their comprehensive plan found consistent by the state. What they did and what they can do under the regulation, and what you could do, is request a waiver from them of having a growth area, because you don't have any kind of consolidated development area that you want to see become a growth area. The jeopardy is, will they approve that or not? Brownfield's got approved, and that one was just done last year. This year.
Yeah.
So, it really depends on what you want to do, but beyond that, I honestly don't see a lot of upside to consistency compared to what it was the last time you did your plan, you know, back in 1991, because most of that law is just kind of a shell of itself at this point. So I'll leave you with that thought process for now, and certainly we can talk about it. What it means is, if we do go for consistency, again, there are certain things in the state checklist that we're going to have to make sure we provide information on, and if we don't do consistency, there are things that we can say, we don't need to do with that. But you'll have a plan, that gives you guidance going forward on what the town's needs and desires are, and that is what the ultimate goal is for you anyway.
That's done. How are you guys doing? You got any questions so far? We just, for a bunch of thoughts? Yeah, but
I'm just wondering with this process, so are we starting from scratch, or are we building on to the 1991, making revisions, or?
That's a great question, because we always debate that in our office as well about, you know, what is an update versus what is a new plan. From where we sit and what we're going to provide to you, it's a new plan. Certainly there may be base information in each one of those sections that we can draw on from a historical standpoint and other pieces, but effectively what you'll have is a new plan.
I suppose you could use the old one as a template too.
Oh, absolutely.
and we will.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing you will find that has come a long way, believe it or not, and Reagan and I were talking about that earlier today as well, is that your plan from 1991 and the way they did plans back then is very dry, it's very long, it's very scientific reading at times when you're looking at conservation or environmental issues. We tend to shy away from that now. We want people in the town that are lay people to be able to read it and understand it. We want to provide pictures, we want to provide colored graphs and charts, so it's not as scientific of a document, if you will, that you had the last time. That doesn't mean that you're gonna have less data and less information to make intelligent decisions with. You'll have the same, if not more. But it's going to be less of a, 300-page document that you fall asleep after the second page when you're reading it.
Yeah. The
We
hope
hope.
is it becomes easier to use in that sense, and hopefully will be, turned to more often than some of these things are. Scientific. Thank you.
I read this.
Yeah.
I was actually pretty impressed. I mean, being from away, only having been here since 2013 and involved with the planning board since 2015, I read it and so much of it rang true. I mean, the basic thrust of the Baldwin Comprehensive Plan is to serve the needs of the town people as a whole while restricting the rights of landowners, particularly owners of rural lands, as little as possible. Yeah, that's Baldwin. And there really is, it is long and there's a lot in here, and it gets better the further you go into it when you get into the actionable parts, but it really is, I was very impressed with what I saw that had been done, and I think it's a good springboard for what we want to do now.
I shared the same sentiment when I read it. I think as 1991 plans go, it's almost more straightforward and better organized than some of them. So.
By the way, I'm the only one at this table that was born when 1991 was written. I was writing plans back then.
Anybody tell me not to reveal a woman's age, please, Ed? Yeah, I know.
You know what I would like to do? I'd like to ask Alan and Norm for your thoughts on this plan and how it was used, how it impacted or didn't impact what happened in Baldwin after the plan. I guess what I'm looking for is, learning from this plan. Are there things that you think we should replicate and that worked well, and are there things that you recall a learning that you would do differently now? Anything come to mind?
The comp plan process was the thing that got me into town government. Norman McKinney said, I need you to be on, he was our selectman for 30 billion years. He said, I need to be on that committee. It's Wednesday night or whatever it was. Okay.
Yeah.
Learned a lot about the town. The community survey in particular was pretty well responded to around town, and I think everybody on the committee learned a lot about the town. They also learned a lot about other people in town. We had a pretty broad spectrum of people on the committee. I think there's like 20 of us. Huh?
Wow.
19.
Yeah.
19
big.
people.
Yeah, and for the most part, everybody was with it the whole trip. There were a few people who dropped out for one reason or another. Discussion was spirited at times, and there was a lot of good thinking. Lee J, do you know Beth Della Valle?
I
Oh,
certainly
yeah.
do. I worked with Beth
Yeah.
years ago.
Beth was at Market Decisions,
Yes,
and
she
she was our leader.
Yeah.
Very
Oh, wow.
detail-oriented
Yeah.
person,
Oh, very.
and I mean, a real group leader.
Yeah.
Somewhere between maternalistic and somewhere like your third grade teacher. I mean, I like her.
Chemistry teacher, are you kidding? Third grade?
No, I had a bad third grade teacher. She was grouchy. But I like that. She did a good job leading the group.
Yeah.
I thought the the goals seemed pretty reasonable.
Mhm.
We hashed them out.
Mhm.
Of course, I was a lot younger and more naive then. After we got done with this, I was put on planning board, secretary, vice chairman, and then finally chairman for a long time. What happened with the report? I have one right here. It got put on the shelf.
Yep.
I don't recall any of us at any level in town ever saying, okay, gang, what are we gonna do this week to implement the goals of the comprehensive plan?
Yeah.
You look in here and some of the stuff is, you gotta do this, 1 year out, this has to be done 3 years out. We didn't do it, nobody ever brought it up. It was a lovely thing, and there it sat on the shelf. I went out into the shelf in the attic this morning and picked this up from its safe place. By the way, somewhere, I think we had a comp plan in the 70s.
Yeah.
And somewhere, I believe I have a photocopy of that. And as I remember, it's like at least 5, 6 pages long. But it did exist. I will try to scout it out just for historical value. The only time that I recall hearing about the comp plan was a couple occasions when we had large conditional use permit applications, and people objected to some facet of the application on the basis that it messes up the rural character of our town, and there was something in here about viewscapes or scenery.
Yep.
It messes up those. Now, rural character of the town, everybody knows what it means, but we look at it a little differently.
Right.
And if you're trying to oppose something, it's delightfully vague.
Yeah.
Fortunately, we learned this in a couple of legal situations, judges basically look to see if the town is in compliance with its own ordinances. David Laurie taught me that.
Yep.
And he's another good guy.
Yep.
If you're in compliance with your own ordinances, fine. Never heard anything or saw anything in the judicial comments about, have you checked your comprehensive plan? So, the end story is, I think it's worthwhile, but I don't think it's the valuable tool, at least not in the way we do things in Baldwin, that it was meant to be, or possibly even could be. And yeah, it's been 3 decades, and a lot of water has gone down the Saco River. Some of this stuff that we've got in here is going to look terribly naive, but yeah, it's worthwhile. But I'm not sure how worthy it is in terms of practical use in government. As I said, I was chairman of the planning board for over a quarter century. I probably could have done better and annoyed my fellow board members occasionally with a boring rendition of why we need to get in compliance with the comp plan, but I didn't.
So, one of the things that I think is important, first off, I mean, and every town does it differently. We work in 39 towns in York County and 1 in Cumberland County and a few in southern Oxford County, north of Foss. But the most valuable thing that could happen for you, based on what you're saying, is that the comprehensive plan. Well, let me back up. You as planning board members get busy dealing with conditional use reviews and site plan reviews and subdivisions. The last thing you're thinking about is working on the ordinances, because it takes several months, 6 months to get something drafted and get it ready for town meeting. One of the things that you could consider as an outcome of this plan is creating an ordinance committee. And what they would do is use the goals, policies, and strategies from the comprehensive plan. And one of the things that we will do, working with you in developing those goals, policies, and strategies, is what is an immediate need, what is a midterm need, and what is a long-term need. Immediate being 1 to 3 years, medium being 3 to 6 years, and long-term being 6 to 10 years, because the life of the plan is usually about 10 years. And then you can start, picking and choosing, what is really important and what should we work on. And leave that to another committee that can just focus on what we would call long-range planning and ordinance work. And some folks do that, and it works really well. Some folks don't do that, and a lot of plans do sit on a shelf. So it's just something to consider. It does mean work for other people. If they want to do it, it's great.
Alan?
Okay, Noel did a very good job of covering, work in the past. And the only thing that I ask is that you use this old plan and things, make what, you somehow change it, these things, and I'd be very happy with all this other stuff.
So, yes, I hear you, and that's part of what our plan is. Certainly makes our life easier. The biggest issues are going to be, the biggest issues on the front end of the inventory piece is going to be updating the data sets.
Yes, I realize that.
Yeah.
It seems there's a lot of water going down the south.
Yep.
So, yes, if that needs to be tremendous changes made, still like to use that as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's a good outline. That makes sense. Yeah, sure.
So one of the things you'll learn, I just learned this, is that Josiah Pierce's name appears on the record book in 1786. So the best I can determine, Joe is a vampire.
He is. That's who Kathy.
Yeah, got the scars to show you.
I think I'd also like to add that I think what Norm was saying is that is helpful guidance in terms of when you do go to make your future recommendation. Thinking about maybe a little bit more critically about, are we really going to implement this? What's the cost if we don't? And what is the benefit if we do? Like, what are things we really do need to think about in the future, especially because things have changed so dramatically, right? And if our ordinance is based off of a 1990 comp plan, at some point, something's going to catch up to us, right? But I do think that committees on their second go on this, or maybe third if there was a 70s plan, are thinking a little bit more manageable in terms of what changes they want to see going forward.
I think the other advantage that the newer plan has is while some of the goals and policies that the town wants to have may still reflect what the last plan had, because certainly nothing was done to accomplish it. There are newer tools that we've developed on how to write ordinances or how to approach certain things that we can help guide for your implementation.
The same goal may be a bit more in reach these days.
Right, absolutely.
Getting them through town meetings is another issue.
That'll always be a hard
That's
one.
right, exactly.
It was interesting. Brownfield hires me to moderate their town meeting. They had one in June. And they had an article, you want to approve the comp plan. There were two guys in the audience that voted no on everything. With the exception of those guys, it was unanimous.
Yeah.
Wow.
I just like jumping off a log.
Yeah.
Which
We can do away with our meetings.
There you go.
Want to put that in there? Yeah.
Create a council and let them take care of all the votes.
That's one topic that I wanted to have some dialogue on. We have this group here, and we're set up to have monthly meetings. I think it's the third
Wednesday,
of every month. I think we have one scheduled for September. Right now, that's just set up for the, the five-person advisory committee. Because I didn't want to burden the review committee with monthly meetings, but you're certainly welcome to come, so I'll let you know about it. But here's the thought. Community forums. I mean, we have the tool of the survey, which is going to be extremely important to the plan. But the last time this plan was done, they had community forums. And I read in here that they actually had 3 of them between 1990 and 1991. And the one that they talked the most about was they had this community forum to identify and kind of prioritize the community issues with which the plan was going to wrestle. Now, can anybody guess, based on how many people we have at town meeting as well as special town meetings, how many people attended this first community forum?
I can't remember.
94.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Wow.
94.
What did we have, 28 at town meeting this?
Yeah, so that's, I guess that, that popped as a question in my mind here. I know we're gonna do the survey, but do we think we're going to need community forums? Or are community forums more of a thing of the past where we should set up some kind of electronic input for people in town to go on a Facebook page or some kind of a website and input their ideas and priorities and stuff?
From my feeling of how people respond, there's a large group that wants to do it face-to-face.
Yeah.
There's a large group that wants to do it anonymously, and they may come up with crap you don't want to hear. And because it's anonymous, people will put stuff out there. For face-to-face, you have to be more honest. People can see your response, you can see theirs, you actually grow and tell the truth. And it moves forward. So I would say that the face-to-face forum might be the most effective, but secondly, having other input probably would be how some of the younger people might respond. And we need them. And I don't want to exclude them.
And certainly, I think one as a minimum, face-to-face, it adds not only the appearance, but the actuality of transparency to it. This is not just a bunch of people that go meet in the dark somewhere and take your property rights away.
Right.
That's a big thing.
And it could sound that way, for
Yep,
sure, yeah.
yep.
The thing about a forum is, you get your opinion of the whole lot, and maybe just a small group of people.
If you get the word out and you get people through.
Yeah.
But
Which is a labor on the volunteer's part to do that, but it can be done.
That 98 people was before there was cable TV for people to.
Right, it does change.
Yeah, and the other aspect of it, if you wanted to, I was just asking Reagan, she's our in-house expert, but also having the Zoom capability during that meeting available for people that either don't want to physically be here or can't physically be here but want to participate, so we could incorporate that into your
I don't know if you folks have found that, did you do like online select board and planning board meetings?
That we did, probably a year worth of Zoom planning board meetings.
Did you find that your attendance changed at all, having meetings online, like the general public?
I think I was down
Yeah, people didn't come as much onto the online. Okay, that's interesting.
You didn't have the, just general attendees to see what's going on. Pretty much the only people that attended are the ones who were on the agenda.
Yeah, I think a a lot of communities saw the exact opposite. Because it was at their fingertips, people were way more apt to just sort of join on a random evening instead of making a trip out to town often. But I'm sure it could be different for every town.
I mean, so I assist Arundel on a regular basis. I'm actually their town planner. And they did not want to stop Zooming. Their attendance went up so much and people participated that, even with the new law regarding it, they created a policy so that they will continue to have Zoom incorporated into their meetings going forward because, more folks participated.
Maybe you'll see that maybe tomorrow.
When it's appropriate, I'm excited about us having a community forum for all the reasons that have been laid out, but also because using this report, just like the questionnaire in here, this document gives us a very strong basis for an inventory of community issues that people can look at, even look at ahead of time, and then decide, are these still issues? Are there new ones? Which ones do we want to get rid of? Which ones do we want to add? And how has the priority changed?
I think that's really important, Matt, is the timing of them. We're kind of assisting, we're assisting Algonquin, who's going through the comprehensive planning process right now. And their committee basically insisted on wanting to do a visioning meeting right up front, first thing. And I advised them against it. They were pretty adamant about wanting to do it, so I put them in contact with a lady who runs those kinds of meetings, Carol Morris, who lives down in Kennebunk Court, and she advised them against it as well. Simply because, again, timing is everything. And to have a visioning meeting when you don't have anything to present to them, what do you get from that? So, I think it's important that, one of the public forums be, after we get the data or draft of the inventory together so people have something to look at, and you can talk about, we can come and stand up, with boards or whatever and say, here's what the population has done in town, where do you want to go with it? Here's how many houses have been built the last 20 years, are you happy with that? Do you want to see less? Where do we want to go with that? Then there's at least something that you can have conversation about. I think, yes, a community forum is important, but we want to be able to put something in front of them to be able to react to. And then I think a second community forum certainly would be valuable to talk about goals, policies, and strategies. That's where the rubber hits the road on your comprehensive plan, is your goals, policies, and strategies.
To add to that too, I think if there is some real gusto to do it earlier rather than later, one of our communities had a pretty successful public forum presenting their community survey results. So it wasn't the full inventory, but they said, we did this survey, you participated in this survey, and as a thank you pretty much for participating, they really wanted to share what they had gathered and what they had seen. And people did come to see what everybody else had said, and it did sort of foster conversation. Go ahead.
Yeah, I love the data, and I love looking at data. I wonder if there isn't a sociological component here. We have people who split off a 2-acre lot here and a 2-acre lot there. Sometimes people die and leave land to a bunch of grandchildren or children or something.
Yeah.
And land gets split up and developed that way. I wonder if with land prices shooting up right now, we don't have something else that might happen, which is very large acreages coming on the market. I suspect that Nature's Wilderness, 900 acres will end up being a single development at some point, whether it's not for the current, for currently, but 10, 15, 20 years down the road, the next time we have an uptick in building, that's the time to take the profit. When I die, what happens to my land? That's 1,800 acres.
Well, Joe, considering the comp plan says you've been around since the 1700s, I think you've got a ways to go, my friend.
I plan to be around for the next 3 or 4 10-year plans, yes. But I wonder how you get out the sociology of this. I mean, this is really, what I'm talking about is the data that we have had doesn't project out into the future because we haven't had prices shoot up so much.
Right.
I remember my father not buying any more land because at $20 an acre, it wasn't worth it. It was way overpriced.
So I don't want to get into the weeds, but I think it's a very interesting point you bring up, because I'm going to yarn this whole thing back together again, in the sense that if you look at having a consistent, comprehensive plan that has a growth area, unless you can get that wave, and you're looking at, let's use Nature's Wilderness, land, you know, possibility of a subdivision that occurs that it has at least 2 units on every parcel. So now you're not talking about a 70 or 100 acre, 70 or 100 unit subdivision. You've just doubled that.
Yeah.
You know, so that's something to think about in the future for the town.
We could have a subdivision that had more people in it than the town has now.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's being driven by prices in Portland, Westbrook, even Standish.
Yeah, it's definitely pushing on you guys, that's part of that, Route 25 corridor.
Just relay my experience. I've lived in Northern Virginia for 19 years before I moved back here. It wasn't the local people who made the changes. It was the big money from out of town that came in and bought up property.
And the pandemic has really fueled that now. I live in a brand new development in my community, and not only the homes are just, all of our homes have just been built in the last 3 years, 4 years. I've seen the value of the homes double.
Yes.
And as new people have been moving in, I don't want to insult anybody, trust me, but I've seen nothing but Massachusetts plates on those cars that are moving in. So the pandemic in itself, and one of the points we worked on, I think we kind of emphasized that the pandemic has impacted some of the changes to the community.
It's pretty, yeah, I mean, it's clear in, anecdotally, we're here, one of the, we attend some conferences and things as like planning professionals, and one of the ones that I went to last year was the Maine Municipal Association, and they had a whole workshop and session with town staff coming, and it was about new faces, new expectations is what it was called, and it was about these town governments grappling with new people from cities and towns that act and do a lot more than Maine cities and towns do. And it's a real thing that people are dealing with, is trying to understand, set those expectations. And we are seeing, I think we have seen in some building permit data, we can't pinpoint where people are coming from, but pretty much every community that we've been working on a plan in the past year has seen 2021 and 2020 buildings, new home starts, drastically different than 2019 or the year before. So we do have some, data to prove that. And I think that anecdotally, we hear it the most from communities like Baldwin that are just, they were the the boonies, and now they're the outskirts of the suburbs, you know, like, it's starting to push this way. Parsons Field is one we're working with that's really feeling it too. And they're even further out, so, yeah, no, it's definitely a concern. I do wanna go back to your comment about the data not capturing everything, because we can only look back, right? And there is something important to know as just community members, is that even the data that we do have, which is better than it was in 1991, is so imperfect. And it will continue to be. Like, there's just so much you can do. Even the U.S. Census and the American Community Survey, the data that we get from them is pretty good in terms of thinking really big, but it's not perfect by any means, especially for small communities. And I think that to get to the stuff you're talking about, you really just have to put your heads together. Like, that's an important thing that, you know, not everybody would think about, that there are these big landowners and land that's going to go up for sale. We don't have trend, you know, we don't have a past trend that's going to capture what that's going to mean. But there may be some ways that we can think about how to mitigate that. But we just have to identify those as issues that aren't necessarily going to show up in the
The reason we started this to begin with was because of development.
yeah.
And we had a developer come in, almost destroy the town.
Yeah.
So that's why all these rules and regulations, that's where our 2 acre lots size came from,
Absolutely.
the whole 9 yards. And if you think we have to do protection.
The state law says.
One thing I find everywhere I go is developers and the engineering firms that work for them will always try to find a way around it.
I know.
Yeah.
There's no lock-tight way that we can stop it.
But there are more protections.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
absolutely
Oh, yeah.
more that a community can do in terms of zoning, things like that, to mitigate the worst of it. I think, your hand up.
That's why you speak of small housing. We're gonna do away with the 2 acre lot size.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Why? That's totally wrong.
I don't disagree with you. We had no control over it.
I know.
Yep.
I know.
Yep.
But it's still not right.
Yep.
On the way, for the state to tell us we're gonna have to lot size.
I don't know that that's the way it works, though. They didn't tell us what the lot sizes are, they just told us what goes on the lot.
Right. Not necessarily that you're getting rid of the 2 acre, it's just that the 2 acre lot size doesn't mean the same thing.
I know.
Well,
They're gonna use up that 2 acres.
yeah, exactly. But, yeah, go ahead.
So I also did part of my homework. I read most of the plan. I didn't realize it was so long, so I didn't quite get through the whole thing, but, I was also impressed by the amount of data there. And even, there were points where I thought, you know, you always want to think where we are right now is this unique moment, but then looking back and the fact that they were struggling with affordable housing, I say they, I mean, I was part of it, you know, struggling with affordable housing issues then.
Yeah.
And we are now again, and, you know, that was what that act was a response to. But, also, I was really, unless I missed it or haven't gotten to it yet, it's so central to the goals and the definition of what's important to the town, and talking about the rural way of life, right? And I know, Norman, you said everyone knows what that means, but it is not defined, I don't think, is it?
Nope.
Is it ever defined?
Everybody defines it their own way.
Well, exactly, and I even went and Googled and looked up different definitions, and it's kind of mushy.
It's very much.
And the interesting thing to me is that it came out of, I think, the notion that we have an agricultural history here, but this is no longer an agricultural community.
Right.
And so, it's almost like it's up to us now to say, I mean, it used to be these big lots and huge, you know, landowning acreages were, made sense when you had a farm.
Yeah.
But now it's more a choice we can make or not make, and it's no longer driven, and in fact, the economics are going kind of the other way, like with people being able to work remotely. You know, there's no need for many acres or 2 acres, or,
Right.
so it's sort of for us to say, like, what are our priorities, and
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good discussion point. I come from and grew up in a town here, or a city, actually a city, here in southern part of the state. And they, back in 1960, developed a zone that was an agricultural zone that did not allow residential development unless you were able to show that you were going to obtain 51% of your income from that land. That would never fly today, and that community has actually done away with that requirement. I was fortunate.
Very recently.
Yeah, and I was fortunate enough to have worked for that community for quite a long time and be one of the guardians of that regulation. But going forward, just to kind of dovetail that, I worked on the comprehensive plan for Freiburg probably 6 years ago now, I think, somewhere around there. And agricultural activity is still very vital and important to them up there, but what we found was that, to your point, is that the 10-acre farm was more prevalent today than the 200-acre farm. People are being able to do multiple types of agricultural operations on smaller land sizes and make a living. And so that's where their encouragement is these days, is encouraging agriculture, but making the lots smaller or more manageable for people, and they feel comfortable being able to, you know, raise a certain amount of sheep on their property, and oh, by the way, do some, I don't know, tomato crops or something, and they find a niche market for themselves, and they're able to make a living with a couple of different types of agricultural crops that they may feel comfortable raising.
I think another good point about the rural character term is that as you start to look at a lot of these plans, almost every single plan in Maine says they want to preserve their rural character. Like every plan, from maybe like with the exception of Portland and Lewiston, Auburn, but we have, communities down the seacoast that are York, Kittery, who are preserving their rural character. And I know to you folks that would, make you chuckle because it's just not, it's different, right? And that's what I'm really trying to say is that it's so amorphous. And if every community had the same definition of what this rural character means, then they would all look the same, right? And so I think, yes, there's a lot for you to define there. And to better define it, it just means easier and better outcomes, right?
I think that's one of the comments I made earlier about we're now in the 21st century. When I would visit my grandparents here in the 70s, there was no traffic in front of their house on that road.
Yeah.
There is more traffic on that road now, I think, than any other road in town except 113. There is a truck coming by, screeching his brakes every 3 minutes.
Yeah.
You want more of it?
Right. What I'm saying is, when we say preserve the rural character, it's gone. From laws, just citizens in town.
Well, I think one of the things to think about, though, is you've got what you can control, which is the rural character of Baldwin, as you choose to define it. The unfortunate part is what you can't control, which is those other communities around you where the traffic is coming through because you have, main access ways, 113 or whatever it may be. So I think there's a mix of what we can control and try to preserve, and then those issues that we have to deal with outside our community.
Yeah, I think we can move. I mean, this is great conversation.
Absolutely.
So in terms of, sort of the nitty-gritty of how we want to move forward, we will plan to submit to the advisory council, I believe is the term we're using, the sort of smaller working group, a chapter draft of the inventory about once a month. So we'll get something to you the committee can review it and provide us feedback, and we can make revisions and then sort of move forward. In terms of like defining what that committee or the larger committee's role is in revising these drafts, basically a word of warning is that a lot of committees can get really, really stuck in the weeds on data and inventory. It's so much information, and it is important, but just this conversation with all of you makes me think that you would agree that it's not the primary priority of this plan. Thinking forward, making goals and recommendations is what really matters and what you're really here to do. The inventory is important so that we're not doing that out of thin air, like we need that, but it's something we want to do and do well and move forward on. So that being said, SMPDC will do our best to provide what data is available. We will ask the town to help provide what data they have, and we'll try and draft some chapters for you to work with. There will be things that we get wrong, 100%, and we need you to be able to check us on that and say, you know, this is actually not true anymore, or this thing exists in town that you didn't know about, and we should add this, or et cetera, et cetera. Those kind of big things and revisions are really important, and we need your feedback, but there is a sort of a line where we don't want you spending that much energy on these chapters because we need you to save it up for the good stuff later down the road. So that's as much as I'll say about that. But usually we find that at one good meeting of discussion and then our sort of revisions behind the scenes are enough on a chapter by chapter basis. So that's what we will shoot for. Some chapters may take us longer than a month, but I'm pretty confident that we can get things done in that sort of manner. So I did bring with me a sort of draft schedule. Great. I think Matt's just the one at the table that doesn't have one. I think I gave you.
Yep.
Did I keep one for myself? No, but I have this one.
Should pass it right on down.
This sets forth both sort of basically like what your meeting topic would be at every meeting for the next year, if we can stay on a sort of a good foot on schedule. And alongside the chapter review, we also have survey, creation, and that kind of thing planned out here. Obviously, this is flexible, and this is your plan, and I want you to drive the boat, but I think it's helpful to have something to start with. Yeah?
I got a question.
Hit me.
Something that we didn't talk about in the last plan, and I don't see in this one.
Yep.
In a comprehensive plan, is it appropriate to talk about the town governance? I would like to look at whether our current form of government with basically 3 selectmen in a town meeting still works in this day and age, or whether we should look at a town manager to do the executive-y stuff and the selectmen to provide adult supervision for that individual. It's a big thing. Without going into too much detail, I think the days have changed when a man could change his shirt after milking the cows and go to the meeting and be a selectman. Right now, we've got good fellows, well-meaning, but they are part-timers and they're amateurs, as are all of us in town. And it may be time to get professional advice. One of the things I saw, they just came out with the federal earmark money, and it was all listed in the paper, and politicians are taking credit for it. Nothing came to SAD 55. There's a big hole. The closest money, I think Standish got a bunch of bucks for sexual assault or prevention or something like that. I think if we had full-time people who are paid to be on the job, they might be hollering at the right people and do more for us. That's all I'll say about that, but I'd like to see that somehow included in the things we talk about.
So, when we get to it, not till next May, when we get to it, probably later in the next spring, one of the chapters is Public Facilities and Services chapter. It certainly can be brought up. I mean, I think that there are different levels that you can look at and consider, whether it's town manager or just an administrative assistant. Some of the towns we work with have administrative assistants. So they don't have,
You have someone. Yeah.
We do, but not a municipal professional type.
so we can
Good
take a look
person.
at that and provide, you know,
Yeah.
some options and narratives of how other towns are operating.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think, Lovell's doing the same thing. I think it's going to be, I think you're gonna see it more in small communities, comprehensive, just sort of a capacity question.
Yep.
Of, you know, do we have enough? Do we need to?
Yep.
I presume the districts are all going to go to the vote of the people.
oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes, yes. Adoption of the plan will be the last thing that will occur once we get it done. And that will go to the voters, absolutely. Some of the other things that we, you know, have mentioned in this timeline that, can be looked at or done if you want to, and I think we've discussed it with just the planning board and whatnot, is the idea of, issues like aging in place. Don't know if that's an important issue for you folks here in town or not.
Yes, it is.
The other one is climate. One of the things that, that we've done or seen, and have recommended incorporating some of the other towns we're doing, is that, thankfully for us, the town of York hired a private consultant that did a plan that was around $200,000. And one of the things that their plan did was incorporate, not us, yeah, that their plan did through their consultants was incorporate like a paragraph in every chapter as to what the climate implications may be for the town based on housing issues, or based on, not to get political about it, but, you know, based on, if there's heating days like today, are there places for seniors to be able to go? Or how does the town want to consider looking at that sort of thing? What are the impacts on transportation? We don't get into, we try not to get into, policy or decision-making, but again, provide information on it. I don't know if you want that or not. We don't have to do it. Just a thought. Trying to think if there was anything else that we talked about.
You know, some of the sort of hot topic development issues that communities are facing, like solar arrays, solar siting, marijuana, what was the other big one that happened recently that I can't think of? Oh, storage units. I've had several communities talking to me about sort of like just different specific development issues that were not, you know, even perceived when the last plan was written, like the large-scale solar array, incorporating some of that into your land use or, you know, other chapters to make sure that those sort of important kind of hot development topics are.
Yeah, I mean, excuse me, on the solar issue, you know, another one of the towns that we work with on a regular basis, wanted an ordinance that, dealt with not only solar, because they ended up getting, hit with 3 solar projects in a very short period of time, but what other issues are out there along that line. And so we try to be really visionary and look out and find out what's happening in other parts of the country. And some of the things that are coming down the line that you might want to at least mention in some part of this plan is the issue of battery storage, which is a real thing. And we're talking, you know, really big buildings with really large battery systems in them. We're not talking, you know, car batteries or 9 volts. We're talking really big battery systems. The other one is geothermal. And not just geothermal for the residential home, but there are companies out there that are putting in massive geothermal plants. I don't know if they're ever gonna come to Baldwin, but it's certainly worth, you know, having that on the radar screen for the future. So anyway, there are things like that that we can, incorporate. Yeah, if you want us to do that, when we get to those points.
And as you think of them, bring them up, because I think, you know, you guys have a better read in some ways about what's going on in the community and what we need to address. And it may not slip perfectly into a chapter, or it may not be something that we're, you know, already intending on including, so your input on that is good. Any other thoughts or questions on the schedule? As it stands? Yeah.
So, based on the discussion we had earlier, I got the distinct impression that we would be well served to work in a community forum before we finalize the survey, so that we're making sure that the survey addresses the key issues that exist, because, you know, the results of the community forum could inform the questions that we have on key issues in the survey.
Yeah, that's a valid point, Matt. But let me also.
Is there another way to?
No, I think that's a valid issue for discussion. But one of the other things that we should probably mention is that the survey, one of the things that we like to do is we're going to go back to your 1991 survey and incorporate what and work with the group to work on what were some of the important questions that may still be important today, so that we can set a baseline of questions and see if attitudes have changed and how they have changed in certain areas, and then incorporate new questions that may be facing us today with new issues. So.
The example I was talking about, they were actually presenting the survey results in a community forum.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, it's definitely possible.
Good. We'll work on that.
Yeah.
And in terms of moving forward, we have these tentative meetings set up the third Wednesday of every month, which would be September 21st, October 19th, November 16th, December 21st. When we have those, is this a good time of day for everyone, this 3 to 5 period? Is it good for you folks?
Works for me, and the two of us got home from Newfield last night at 10:30, and I was up the night before. So yeah, 3 o'clock meeting is a wonderful time for any of us.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What we'll do, the required attendance will be the 5 folks in the advisory committee. And then invitations will go out to everybody on the review council if you can make it. We'd love to have you, but I don't want to, make it burdensome so that you have to come on a monthly basis. But I think that kind of the plan is we'll be doing a lot by email as well. They get a draft chapter, they send it to the 5 people on the advisory committee. We take a first look at it, tune it up a little bit, make sure there aren't any gaping holes or anything like that, and then get it ready for it to go to the review council, which we can do on that monthly basis.
Matt, I would also like to see, at least on the town website, a general public notice.
Yes.
Just, this is what's gonna happen, if you wanna come and listen and all that. Again,
Transparency.
well, not only that, but we have to work hard to make everybody confident that people aren't trying to pull the property rights rugs out of them or out from under them or do anything like that. Conspiracy theories get going. I've started a few myself. But,
Right.
And it's important to emphasize, and Reagan mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, and you folks that have done this before, this is not an ordinance and this is not regulation, this is merely a guiding document that like any business would have as a business plan.
Yep.
So I really think that's important.
but you know that, and we know that,
Yeah.
Gotta get it out there.
but get it out there.
Absolutely,
You're right.
absolutely.
The video of this will be on the YouTube channel, and I'll work with Robin and Bob to get some information on the town website,
Yeah.
and announce, people can watch this and add their input and things like that.
I haven't looked at the videos lately. Is the quality good enough that you can watch and hear everybody?
I think in here they will be. We did have problems with them in the big room over there, just because of the location of the camera and the sound architecture.
Yeah. I know Parsons Field and Sebago, again, I do their town meetings for, they've spent some half-decent money on decent audio-visual stuff just for that purpose, because nothing's more frustrating than trying to watch a meeting and all you hear is muffled stuff and chairs scraping.
Yeah, we have that problem with the planning board meetings that we have in the room over there because of the location of the camera and muffling and things like that. So that's something that we'll watch this one and see how it is, and if we need to make improvements, we can certainly talk about it.
Take under advisement.
Yep. What other thoughts or questions does everybody have as we get ready to close the meeting out and move forward?
So I'm just looking at the schedule, so in preparation for our meeting on the 21st, are we going to receive a draft survey right away?
That is the last thing on our to-do list of things to talk to you about, which is great. I don't know, Hannah, you feel good talking about that?
So I guess next steps is creating the survey. The plan, at least presented to you now, would be for us to create a draft of the survey, and have that for you at the next meeting. Everyone would go through it, we discuss, should we really be asking that? Should we also ask this? Those types of questions. I guess that kind of brings in the question of whether or not you want to have some type of public forum to bring in the questions for the survey. That would need to be scheduled pretty quickly if we wanted to be discussing the draft next month. So that's a decision to be made. If you decide to not go that route, it would just be, internal. Anyone who wants to come, we would be presenting that draft so we can make sure that we're getting what we want out of the survey so it actually helps. If you put on a survey and it doesn't ask the questions that you want it to, it's going to be a waste of everyone's time. So we want to make sure that it does show what the vision is for the town, but the public input or not.
Sometimes you see all these graphics in PowerPoint presentations. People always use a funnel, you start wide and then, you get down to here and everything distills. Well, it doesn't really work like that. Sometimes when you start so wide, it is a very unwieldy process to try and distill everything, and I'd like to see this group here work with SMPD&C to draft a survey, draft what we feel the key issues are, based on the great starting point that we have, and the learning that we have from from Southern Maine, working with all these other communities, then we have something relatively, formulated and laid out and digestible for a community forum to take a look at and more easily say, and we can challenge them to, let's look for sins of omission and sins of commission. What is not in here that should be in here, and what is in here that shouldn't be in there, and what do we want to change? And I just get the sense that that might be a productive way to go.
I think I would also caution you about overthinking the survey.
Right.
Because, it can't be too long, or you're not gonna get that many responses.
Right. Yep.
And if you have too many differing opinions about what should be in it, it may take you a very long time to write it. I've had a committee spend 6 months, 8 months on a survey that they were tied up in it and didn't ever start their inventory, and then suddenly your plan process is a year longer than it needs to be. So I think that you're absolutely right that critically thinking about this is important, but I think I would just caution you to getting too many.
I am going to do my utmost to help out on that process. I was a marketing researcher for Bristol Myers Squibb globally for 30 years, and I've seen great surveys, and I've seen horrible surveys, and when you throw in the kitchen sink, the first question I always ask people is, what decision are you trying to make? What decision are you trying to make, and what action do you want to take? And you start from there, and that informs the questions that you want to ask. And one thing that you do before you field a survey is you look at every question and you say, what are we going to do with the information that we get from asking this question? Is it actionable? Is it nice to know, or is it need to know? And so we'll have to work on that to make sure that the results of the survey are truly need to know and actionable.
I think you're going to do that.
You hit on a point that I've been thinking about. I haven't read the survey through, but getting into it, I ought to look at the end to see what kind of decisions were made. No decisions were made. They're great questions, and some really surprised me. And I guess the decisions made is really majority rules, the stronger responses. Well, besides the direction or decision.
So understand that, in fact, this leads into a couple of things I was going to mention. One is that while the survey is being developed, internally we will already be working on some of these chapters. They don't necessarily go hand in hand. We don't need survey results to develop our data sets for certain sections. Where the survey will be important is that once we start dealing with, goals, policies, and strategies, the survey results are going to help you folks based on what are the townspeople saying, where do they want this community to go with certain issues, and then you'll be able to take their information, the data sets, in your own thought process, and develop those goals, policies, and strategies. So, yes, I think it's important, majority rules, but as it comes to developing the town's goals, policies, and strategies, that's only one factor that will come into play for you.
And that would be directly reflected in, as you were saying, making sure that questions in the survey are actionable. if we're asking questions that could not turn into a goal, policy, or strategy in the end, do we need to ask it?
Lori?
Yeah, I don't know, maybe it's me, but I'm not as worried about the process of coming up with the questions. I think probably this group can come up with a good set of questions. I'm a little more concerned that getting the survey out to a good, solid representative sample of the town. Because as I read through the 1991 report, it was clear that, like, younger people weren't totally represented as much, lower income people weren't. And there's good reasons for that. I mean, you know, people are busy, they don't have enough time. But I think I would really like to see us think about how can we make sure that those people get a chance to express how they feel. So it's not just, you know, when I look at the composition of this group, I think we're all of a certain age, you know, and I'm gonna go home and talk to my 29-year-old daughter about this meeting and see what she thinks, you know, just out of curiosity, like, what do you think's important? But I'm more concerned about that, like, that we really get input from everyone.
Do you have, any kind of, late summer, fall festival or anything going on that's, you know, public, community or oriented at all? And the reason I ask is because that's a good place to be able to have surveys available where, you know, you do get a good mix of people coming out to town.
We do have the library fair, which is coming up too soon, 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But we also have the community, auxiliary that is doing a flea market.
Ooh.
And so we might have a table where people can stop in, rather than the clipboard in the face.
Right.
Have
Yep.
some way to say, oh, by the way. And that's the end of September, the 20.
Ooh.
Last time we mailed stuff out. If you had a,
You can mail it out.
It was
There's 2 zip
expensive.
codes. You can mail it out to
But-
all everybody.
I
That's
don't
the
want,
decision you wanna make. Do you wanna mail out a postcard that says, go to this website, that says, come to town office and get one? Do you wanna mail out the survey itself? Do you wanna have the survey online, send it to every single address in town? There are lots of different ways that you can do that, and every town is different. So, I mean, you know a lot better than us.
We did a
How
survey
people down
about
are gonna
internet
respond.
connection.
Yep.
And what kind of responses did we get, Bob?
15%.
About 15%?
That's great, honestly.
Well, I mean, that's important, the internet connection, you know, with all the Zoom classes for the kids. and-
Yeah.
I mean, understand, and I absolutely hear what you're saying. I had one community that I worked with, and they were emphatic going into the plan. They wanted 100% return. They somehow wanted us to go out and twist people's arms and do a survey, yeah. And, you know, I explained to them, a 10% return is a good return.
Okay,
All you're looking for is a snapshot
right,
of what the community's attitude is.
right, but
And
I
if you-
like Lori's concern,
Yeah,
I think that's.
exactly.
I think 10% is
You wanna
a
reach out.
challenge in and of itself.
You wanna reach
Yeah.
out, you wanna make sure everybody has that opportunity.
Right,
But if you only get a 10% return,
right,
understand, that's a good
don't be
return.
crushed, okay.
Yeah.
Lori, did you have something?
no, I would reiterate in support of what Laurie said. The US mail is gonna be the most universally distributed. There's a whole lot, I'm not on Facebook, I'm not, you know, but.
When are tax bills coming out?
Huh?
When are tax bills coming out, or have they already gone out?
Well, I think they're gonna be mailing them out at the end of the week.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, but US mail is expensive, but it goes to almost every house,
Right.
regardless of financial, social status.
Right, absolutely.
I like to look at things forwards and backwards and do what ifs. And I have to ask, multi-part question, are we rushing the survey? When you look at the survey and the chapters, you know, are they completely separate, or if we do the chapters, do we learn more about what we want to include in the survey or not? I guess hypothetically, if this is a 2-year process, what if we worked on all these chapters and all the content and did the survey at the beginning of year 2? What are the pros and cons?
Well, I don't know that there are pros and cons, per se. Again, I think that the survey is gonna, at least for a while, is gonna run parallel to us doing some internal work. The thing that I did do in one plan was that in, certain aspects of the plan, we incorporate, and we can do that at any point, just because we take a draft chapter and say, okay, it's good, we're gonna put it to bed for a while. We can always add or make adjustments, but one of the things I did in one plan was put in survey results, that were germane to housing issues, and just said, here's what the survey said.
Yeah.
And just incorporated that into part of the narrative of the plan, as a little side block. So, you know.
The earlier you have a survey, the more you can work towards what the people want.
Yeah. Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
I definitely would not put it off till the end.
Okay.
I think it may also be helpful to have the information before you start the goals, policies, and strategy process. If you start it at, you know, if you plan to start your survey process after the inventory is done, but before that, I think you're building a lot of time there that you may get hung up. That being said, I don't know that there's a downside to stretching out your actually creation of the survey. I think if that's your goal, to have it done before you begin goals, policies, and strategies, we do have some wiggle room.
Right.
I think maybe you just want to make a conscious decision about how much time you are going to spend on it and set yourself a soft deadline. And really, I think, you know, having it up front and us giving you the schedule isn't necessarily to say you can only take this long on it, but to say we should move on from it at a certain point, you know, and
When's the next regular town meeting?
We haven't said it yet, but it's the first, Saturday in May. Based on,
Yeah, because I think that might be we're talking about sliding it a little bit, but, you know, that town meeting might be a good opportunity to communicate survey results to, the people, as we're transitioning to the goals, policies, and strategies.
Oh, I think you would definitely, you know, based on our timeline, even if it flips a little bit, you're gonna have your survey. The question is, survey done by May. Most definitely.
Yeah, because, you know, we could do things like, if people are filing in here, you know, we can have, poster boards with key results of the survey along the hallways, and people can look at it, and, you know, it's a good chance to reach them and promote the transparency and some of the learning and things.
Most definitely.
I think the other thing I would just caution you about spending longer on the survey, I don't think it's a bad idea at all, but I don't think it should delay your chapter review. I think we continue to send you those chapters and get that moving, but I think it's possible. So if you have thoughts about amending this, let me know, we can shift things around.
Yeah.
What you think should be back, but.
So, if anybody has any thoughts or comments, anything, board for them and a go-between with, SMPDC. And then I'll keep you, updated on, what's going on. And we'll have our, next, meeting, Wednesday, September 21st from, 3 to 5. And, are there any rules against, alcohol in the town office?
There probably is, yeah.
I mean, we had some requests.
It might send a bad message. Nothing says we can't have it in the parking lot, though.
Okay.
I could always get special dispensation from my executive director, and we could have the meeting in our office.
I will say, I went to a committee meeting last weekend at a community, and when we came and sat down in the chambers, there was a, Allagash White can on the floor next to one of the council members' chairs. I thought, oh, that was interesting, let me take it off. I won't name the it was pretty fun.
Much as I think it's a fun idea, I think it might make for bad visuals and stuff.
Oh, of course.
Almost definitely.
Oh, yeah. I did, we used to video all of the, marketing research that we, did, and, most times the camera is out in the interview room. This time, the camera is in the back of the viewing room, and I was caught on video that later played in the company of me squeezing a lime into a Corona. It didn't go over well.
Yeah. Well, oh wow. Okay.
Great.
Good? Thanks, everybody.
Thank
This
you
was
for
terrific.
being here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Exciting.
It's going to be very interesting and I think rewarding for us to do this and then and really focus on tying it into the land use ordinance and the shoreline zoning ordinance and things like that. I think that's where the real payoff is for us in this process. Not just completing the plan, but then building the tools to help us make sure that the town evolves and that it becomes a way for us to actively manage change. Even if we can't put a toll booth outside Bob's Road.
Yeah, I mean, this is just the beginning, and the completion of the plan is just the beginning, because then it's the whole implementation.
Everybody grab a plate and take some of those goodies with you home to people at home.
I just had kind of a little technical question. I mean, in terms of presenting this to the town, once this report's done, is it coming from the planning board, or is it coming from?
Coming from you, coming from the comp plan committee, I think, as a recommendation to the select board.
Okay.
Yeah. You are the acting body. At least that's my impression, I don't know.
I'm going to follow up with Gordon Wentworth and with Paul Thomas to make sure that they know that the video is on the town website and see if they'll watch it and give us any feedback or thoughts that they have.
Good.
Awesome, thanks, folks.
Sure, thank you.
Since Matt wouldn't have trouble cooking over there.
Oh, yeah. So I had a couple of questions which kind of.
Well, when I was touched, so many people were so concerned with preserving the rural character, and I consider you the rural character.
I'm glad.